episode of the DailyFlip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be talking about international courts and the power that they are going to possibly give to nations around the world who feel as though they are underserved by the climate mitigation techniques of different countries. I know it sounds interesting. Stick with me. We're actually really going to talk about international power and whether or not the UN has the power to do what they're about to do. Of course, we will end today with a daily delight, a story meant to leave you feeling positive, ready to take on the day. Now, that's enough. Let's get into our daily debate. Should the U.S., more accurately, should any country, but for those of us who live in the U.S., for those of you who recognize the U.S.'s place as the leader of the free world, where is the line? At what point do we give up our sovereignty? At what point do we give up our own rules, regulations, customs, culture, whatever it may be, however you want to frame it? And how do we respond to a UN that is actively trying to undermine said sovereignty? I know that probably sounds a little belligerent, and for anybody who loves the UN, they're probably like, oh, you stupid Westerner. And for anybody who actively benefits from the UN in one of the nations that feels underserved or historically has been underserved, once again, the exact same phrase will probably come out of their mouth. But I want to know what your opinion is. Throw it down in the comment section before we get into my opinion. So, with that, let's actually jump into the article. It comes from ABC News, headline reading, quote, "The UN's highest court will decide Wednesday on the climate obligations of countries." So it has already decided, but the decision itself is less important because I feel as though the framing of this article actually provides, and also I'm recording this on Thursday, the framing of this article provides a more engaging conversation than the decision itself, because the decision doesn't actually matter. Why is that? Well, one, we don't recognize their authority. As the strongest nation in the world, why would you subject yourself, and I'm being a bit hyperbolic. There are plenty of different metrics in which you could describe strength, culturally, morally, militarily, economically, so on and so forth. But I think across all the spectrums, across all the different metrics, we would, as a total, as a conglomeration of those numbers, come to be the strongest. And our leadership is, while not necessarily loved, enjoyed, or respected, definitely not denied across most of the common world. So why would you, as that nation, give up any sovereignty and allow someone else to dictate how you're to interact in a world stage? Now, of course, we have treaties, we have obligations to the UN, we have rulings from them. A lot of the actual rulings from the International Court and the criminal court especially, and these different judicial systems on an international scale, we aren't subject to a lot of them. We choose not to, though, of course, with treaties, when ratified by our own country, we are actively making a choice to give up our sovereignty, or at least to create joint rules in which to operate under, therefore undermining our own preferences. And you could say that's still another case of a problematic concession to the world or to other countries, though, of course, the whole point of treaties is that we ratify them. We have made the choice to do so, therefore we are willing to give them up. And as being a member of the UN, you can make the exact same argument, though, if we're being frank, the UN was set up by the victors of World War II to be a tool of power to enable the 4 to 5 ruling powers, democratic powers, before the shift in China happened, and also, of course, the USSR was given a seat, so that would be number 5. But the point being is it was a tool to enable us to wrest some power and influence across the world in a way that would seem less bias. Now, you can talk about the genuine intentions of the UN, but anyone who looks beyond the simple facade of the UN, the progressive message of the UN, and looks at why so many across the political spectrum realists were willing to play into it, is because they saw it as a way to cement their own power. So, with all of that in mind, we actually need to get to some of the context from the article, because it proffers a very interesting position and it provides a springboard to continue on through this conversation. Quote, After years of lobbying by vulnerable island nations who fear they could disappear under rising seawaters, the UN General Assembly asked the International Court of Justice in 2023 for an advisory opinion, a non-binding but important basis for international obligations. So, end quote. So there's two layers of this here. One, non-binding, though it does provide a ruling on which these countries could proffer a assessment of whether or not they are being mistreated, they are being negatively affected by other countries' actions on the climate front. And then the other part that's fascinating here, in my opinion, is that it comes from the UN General Assembly. So over the course of the last 60 years, and of course I leave room to not get all the details perfect, but over the course of the last 60 years, the General Assembly has grown in its power because it is the place that is not the Security Council, which is dominated by a permanent seat system. And through the General Assembly, more people have been able to create voting blocks in order to get their initiatives passed. Now, of course, the Security Council is what actually matters. And that is not to say it just matters because those powers are on it, but because it actually has more of a staying authority and is less likely to have the opinions flip-flop back and forth. And also, it actually provides a system in which there are permanent seats and the major members that can actually use their influence, their power, their military might to affect change in the world. A simple ruling from the UN, especially one like this that is non-binding, that cannot be backed up by military force, is simply a notion thrown into the wind, blowing around. There's nothing to anchor it down. There is very little to enforce it. Now, let's go a little bit further in here, because I think it elucidates what the remedies will be for some of these nations. Even though it says a non-binding opinion, this is the nation blocks that feel as though they are being used and manipulated, using their leverage within the General Assembly in order to create a case and an opportunity to actually level accusations against those who they perceive to be having more power and not being responsible with their climate talks and initiatives. Quote, any decision by the Hague-based court would be non-binding advice and unable to directly force wealthy nations into action to help struggling countries. Yet it would be more than just a powerful symbol, since it could serve as the basis for other legal actions, including domestic laws. Quote, what makes this case so important is that it addresses the past, present, and future of climate action. It's not just about future targets, it also tackles historical responsibility. But we cannot solve the climate crisis without confronting its roots, Joe Cudhardy, a senior attorney at the Center for International Environmental Law, told the AP. So, the heart of the issue. This is people wresting for power. That I'm not trying to be mean, I'm not trying to be hypercritical. It is simply true. This is a cynical move in a political world in order to undermine the ability of wealthy nations to operate as they so choose, even though the answer actually should be that we should not undermine any nation as they pursue their own sovereign interest unless there are direct moral atrocities that come along with those decisions, and those moral atrocities are made willingly and with full intent in order to harm others. That is the actual matter, because intent does matter, especially on an international stage when you have to not only weigh the values of your country, the needs of your people, but also you have to look at a balancing scale and understand that other people will be affected. But as a sovereign nation, your prerogative is to protect your people first, to empower your people first, to allow prosperity within your nation. Of course, I don't necessarily think that governments have to allow for, enable, and sponsor prosperity throughout their country. I think that is the job of the people and the culture and so on and so forth. But on an international scale, we have to have representatives that fight for our prosperity. because every other nation, just like every other individual actor in society, is looking out for themselves. You can look out for others, you can be a benefactor to the rest of the world, but at the end of the day, any ceding of your power to others will only lead to a lack of proper addressing of the needs of your citizens, and that is the only thing a government should do if they are presented or presenting themselves as the representatives on an international scale. My opinion, of course, though, I think it holds true, and I think even the most idealistic of people would not disagree that the nation should put the interests of its people, if not first, at least on the list. There's no one that's going to say, actually, we have to sacrifice in order to help other people, and not just sacrifice in small ways, but rather to our own detriment. We have to degrade ourselves in order to help those other people. Then again, I could be wrong, and maybe I haven't talked to enough of those people recently. I used to believe that the talking point about certain people that truly hate America, and they don't necessarily think that we should put ourselves first. I used to hear these talking points all the time, and I've met one or two people across my multiple journeys within this nation to different places to have these sort of discussions. But a majority of them actually do believe in the protecting of our citizens, if not first, like I said, at least on an equal plane, and to simply say that we have to throw away our wants, needs, and prerogatives would be naive, and it would be a generalization that is not true about most of these individuals. But hey, with that, let's actually jump into a story that's more enjoyable, a little bit more happy. Leave a smile on your face as you're coming out of lunch. So this one comes from Animal Planet. Headline reads, "Saving a Church from a Deadly Gator. Gator Boys Animal Planet." And it is absolutely, I would say, terrifying to some degree, but adorable watching these guys basically wrestle with this alligator to get him out and protect the church. And the fact that they're called the Gator Boys is absolutely amazing. So if you want to read this article, watch the video that's attached there, or you want to read the other article from ABC, both will be linked in the description below the like and subscribe button. Also down there, you can find the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Podvine, as well as the Twitter handle at your DailyFlip, where I post these links on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and to a link to 6 and 6, which is a international news segment that does 6 stories in 6 minutes or less. That comes out on Tuesday and Thursdays, and the links will also be posted on at that Twitter handle. So, with all that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe, don't die.